Hello and welcome everyone to the next installment of our podcast on Making Connections, a handbook for effective formal mentoring programs in academia. I am here in our session today with the authors of the case study number 3 in chapter 16, a case study of the statewide faculty to student mentoring program at Utah State University, who is written and collaborated by Jeff Spears, Kim Hales, and Hannah Lewis, who are all here with me today. Jeff Spears, also sometimes known as Dr. Jeff Spears, is an assistant professor in the Department of Social Work at Utah State University. He completed his MSW at the University of Kansas and PhD in social work at the University of Utah in 2018. And his research interests include community organizing, cryptocurrencies, aging issues, and undergraduate mentorship. He currently serves on the steering committee and also faculty chair for the Price campus at Utah State University. Kim Hales is a faculty lecturer in the Department of English at Utah State, and she completed her MA at Bowling Green State University. And in addition to full-time lecturing with an emphasis in teaching composition to concurrent enrollment students, Kim is the past editor-in-chief of Utah State University's Journal on Empowering Teaching Excellence and is currently a faculty senator, a faculty mentor, a local campus mentoring committee member, and is the co-chair of Utah State University's Faculty to Student Mentoring Program. Dr. Hannah Lewis is a lecturer of mathematics at Utah State University Eastern. She joined the faculty at USU after completing her doctoral degree in mathematical sciences from Utah State in 2020 and has served as a faculty mentor since the program began in 2020 and has served as a member on the steering committee beginning in spring 2021. And her efforts in teaching have been recognized by multiple Excellence in Teaching awards. So hello and welcome to the three of you. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having us.
So I'm excited to talk about your case study. There's some really rich elements that I think readers are really going to glean from the work that you have done. So I want to start by asking you all what really inspired the mentoring program and the research that you have done that's shared in your case study.
So the Roosevelt campus where I work, we actually started the pilot program, I think in 2018. And we as a team just really felt inspired by some of the resilience of our students, and watching what they were doing through the 2019 part of the pandemic really made us realize how important it was for us to create a campus connection for our students, and that they needed a sense of belonging. And so as we did that, we started partnering with our other statewide campuses, and because of my previous experiences as a non-traditional student, I was really able to connect with students in that need for a sense of campus belonging, no matter what their background was or what the circumstances were for them attending school, whether they were an older non-traditional or they were a student who had recently graduated from high school and had decided to spend a year or two at home at a rural campus. And so my own personal experiences and then watching the resilience of our students during the pandemic was really inspiring, and I was glad when this opportunity came up.
Yeah, I think what inspired me the most.
I think for me, it was just, I didn't want students to feel alone or like they didn't have resources. And so being able to connect students with the resources that they need was huge motivating and inspiring for me.
Yeah.
I kind of echo what Kim kind of already mentioned, is that for me, I was a first generation student. So going through the hoops of applying for financial aid, if I needed to drop a class, typically I just stayed in the class because I was too scared to ask anybody. So I think Kim kind of talked about the sense of belonging. So in my first year, I actually attended a kind of like an open call for faculty to be engaged in as a mentor. And it really just kind of stuck with me as far as the importance of the program, that, hey, I was 18 once, I needed a mentor. So to kind of give back, I think that's the reason why I got inspired to kind of be a part of the team. And then it kind of transpired into becoming the chair at Price. So then being more of a leadership role was also something that I was kind of really grateful that I had that opportunity the last 3 years.
That's phenomenal. I think so many of the authors that have contributed to the handbook have shared how much their own personal experiences has informed the work that they are doing. And I know myself, as somebody who was a first generation student and non-traditional student, there were so many elements that I had to navigate. What I want folks to hear a little bit about that's really, I think, sort of really key as part of your case study is in building the program, you noticed that there were some things that were missing. There were some things lacking in terms of what was happening with undergraduate mentoring. So can you talk about that and how that really informed the program that you created?
Do you want me to talk? Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, I think, in the first article that we published, and this is before I actually became part of the research group, really what they looked at is the idea of like a theoretical framework that a lot of mentorship programs thought of a good idea and kind of just went with like matching people, but they didn't really have a consistency between how does mentoring lead to the success of students, either graduating or retention. So I think that was the first one is we provided a whole bunch of a lit review and case studies looking at the lack of a theoretical framework. And then the second thing is operational definition. What is mentoring? What's included? We kind of felt this idea kind of stems from not only having faculty be part of the mentorship program, but then also kind of honing in on 3 or 4 different elements that we kind of feel is really important for our students to experience. And the last thing that we kind of found is a lot of schools and a lot of mentoring programs just kind of say mentoring works, but there's not really any data to kind of provide and to kind of back that up. So what we wanted to do is to also take it a step further, say like, here's the data as far as retention rates, sense of belonging, utilizing measurement tools that are reliable and valid. So we want to be able to kind of show that there's a purpose, but then also that there is a quantifiable mark that we're making to say that we're actually being impactful on the students that we're serving. So I think those are the 3 things. We kind of open up the case study talking about all 3, and then we specifically mentioned how Utah State University Eastern and the other statewide campuses kind of meet that benchmark.
Yeah, and I also noted that as part of that process, right, that there was a lot of work put into as you said, being very research driven, and that really informing, defining the purpose and coming to a definition. How important is that for folks to really ground these programs in research and really define purpose and have a clear definition of mentoring?
My experience has been that as we have grown the program, and every one of our statewide campuses is very, very different. And then as we've started to network our program with other programs in the United States, with UNM's program and other ones, I think that our theoretical frameworks are something that makes us feel like we're able to connect with other programs. And it's starting to create a stronger model of what mentoring can do conceptually all across the undergraduate experience in the nation, which is what as educators, that's what we're looking for. We want to support the students at our campus, but if we're going to perform research, we want it so that we can repeat it, so that it can be repeated in other places. And it's interesting that we've worked to have something that's replicable. I don't know if that's the right word, but also that's customizable. So by having a theoretical framework, then other campuses like Price or Blanding or Moab, they can take our framework and then they can customize it to what works for them. But then the data can still be captured so that we're measuring the same thing at each campus. Hannah knows more about research than me, so I may have just totally messed that up.
No, that was excellent, Kim. But when it comes to being able to replicate something, you have to have a definition and you have to have a theoretical framework, no matter what research you're doing. Math, English, it doesn't matter. You have to have those base foundations. And that was really kind of what was lacking. We could see that, I mean, everyone could see the need. Anyone that was working in the mentoring field could see the need for mentorship, but we can't improve it unless we first define it and then decide which direction or a framework. But what Kim was saying about customizable, because a framework doesn't mean it's so structured you can't move it around. It's a framework. It's not a perfect
Restrictive.
pattern, which is
It's not
exactly what
restrictive.
it's not restrictive.
Yeah, but it provides some guidelines, some guidance, right, for folks to work in so they can replicate it. So, and I know that both summative and formative evaluation are a key part of the program that you built. So can you talk about that process?
I think you're up, Jeff.
Can you repeat that? Sorry.
So the question was about the formative and summative evaluation that you all did. That was a key part as I was reading through the case study, as that you've built evaluation in throughout the program. So can you share sort of what that was like and how that contributed to both the outcomes of the programs and the rich research that you all have done?
Yeah. So are you talking about like collecting?
Yeah, so I think what she's talking about is the collecting of the data. So when we did our surveys, that was the more summative, the summative feedback where it's ending, the month has ended, we collect the data, and that is just informing on what we did. But a lot of the formative feedback came from working groups and the meetings that we have on a regular basis, and reporting on how well it's doing and talking about our success stories. I think that's one of the most important things that we do in our monthly meetings is we talk about success stories and then we talk about potential issues. That's hugely formative. And that's just as important as the summative evaluations that are sent out by email that we fill out every month.
And we're starting to get more and more data too, like more students are opting in for the research because it's optional if they want to be part of it. But we're kind of, you know, as I put it in the case study, we're kind of finding some cool results that, you know, the retention from year to year is, you know, 17% higher than compared to just the control group on the statewide campus, which is when we started the program, like the retention rates from, you know, the statewide campuses compared to Logan were pretty low. Same with graduation rates. So I think for me, and also, you know, my AVP is that's what he's most excited to hear about is how are we doing for retention and also for graduation rates? And being able to kind of track that, I think has been really good to kind of move the program a little bit, you know, forward, but then also to improve upon it in, you know, our discussions about how can we improve the program, what we can do better, what we can do different.
And in doing that, then that's part of what we've been really working toward, to create a model that we can share out, that other universities can start to apply, which is the whole, the reason for the book is we've been working on this and then we're like, okay, we've got something really great here. Our quantitative data is solid. And like Hannah was saying, most universities are doing something like this, informally, formally. Everybody's got something. They're doing it intuitively. And the idea that then we could take this intuitive product and turn it into something that had formative and summative assessment, that we can now start actually sharing out our framework works. Here's the numbers to support that. And now we're starting to have other universities say, okay, look, talk to us about how you're doing this. And so, you know, that's kind of the organic way that this has progressed. And having those numbers from the Office of Analytics and the support from the university that's helping us has been, you know, it's just been really great.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I think one of the things that I've been hearing overwhelmingly from the other authors in our conversations is how important evaluation is, and starting with evaluation in mind. So what are some of the lessons you have learned in this process about building an evaluation, collecting data, and then using that data to, Kim, to your point, to advance the program, to share the model, to really cascade it out and create that ripple effect?
Go ahead, Jeff. You look like you were going to start talking.
Yeah, I think the lessons learned is, you know, I think there was a need, right? There was a need for us to do something on the statewide campuses, and doing the assessment or the needs assessment, kind of saying like, what do our students want? So by creating this program, being able to kind of collect the data, I think it just brings, I guess, a sense of fulfillment that we are meeting those needs, that students are telling us, look, like we don't feel comfortable navigating some of the issues that, you know, first year students might experience, or even non-traditional students might experience. So I think the idea of using the data to kind of say like, how do we then now partner with other programs, I think is the next scope. So we do a freshman orientation called Connections at Utah State. And so we're wondering how we can kind of partner with that kind of program to say, let's have those students take the Connections course and be part of the mentorship program. And a lot of the actual faculty that teach the Connections course serve as mentors. So I think it's a good fit. So I think it's now, how do we start partnering with other agencies on campus or other departments to just enhance and kind of put wraparound services, just to use a social worker term, around the students that we're kind of working with, just to make sure that we're staying in touch with them, but also being able to mentor them from different ways, through classes, through the Connections course, but then also kind of talking a little bit more about the one-on-one mentoring.
You know, and I'll say, Tamara, when you said, what are some of the lessons learned? One of the things I think that's been really good is, I do feel like the statewide connection between our campuses has grown. I feel more connected to the Price campus, Blanding, Moab, and I've learned that each one of us is very unique. We serve a very unique student population, and this program not being one size fits all, and watching how other campuses have adapted it to meet their campus needs. I think that's been really great, because we had a pilot program at one of our statewide campuses. Now we've had it at all of our statewide campuses, and I'm really excited for this next step, where we can see other universities possibly taking this model and implementing it. And it's really interesting to see how they adapt it for their campuses. And so for me, one of the lessons learned has been, you know, just how different our campuses are, and student needs in different regions of our state, or of, you know, the Western United States land-grant universities serve a very unique population. And so for me, that's kind of been the lesson learned, is it's very different other places.
And I think that's what's one of the things that's so interesting, that Jeff, you sort of alluded to some of the outcomes, some of the success stories. So can you talk about the benefits, the outcomes of your mentoring programs, and then how that feeds into the quantitative data process that you have used to really capture those experiences?
Yeah, I mean, just being a mentor, I guess I could talk about my personal experiences with it. Is that kind of what you're looking for? Okay. So I think for me, it's the one-on-one mentoring, but then also having a purpose with it. So like with my mentees, sorry, I always sit down and ask them, like, what is it that you want to do in this, like, you know, this relationship? Just like I would sit down as I'm doing therapy with a client to say, like, how can I help? What are some of the questions that you have? And a lot of it is what's next for these students, right? A lot of the students I have in the bachelor's program in social work want to go to graduate school. So some of them are like, I want to present at a conference. And I'm like, great, like, I know how to do that. Let's put up an abstract, or write up an abstract and submit it. And, you know, I'm happy to say that, you know, we've had probably 3 or 4 students that came through the mentoring program that presented at national conferences, which they can then put on their resume to get into graduate school. So I think that's the type of you know, the personal experiences that I've had. And it just kind of goes to show with the data, you know, not only the sense of belonging that the students are experiencing, but that we're also finding that faculty are reporting that it's a fulfillment in their career, fulfillment in their role statements. And it's also to speak to the numbers, you know, the retention rates, students are graduating, students are coming to us when they have issues. You know, I had a student that English was his second language. So we would meet probably 3 or 4 times a month, and we would go over other classes in which he had questions. And if I think he would have passed if we didn't do that. I like to think that he would have, but it made it a little bit easier for him. So not only meeting his goals professionally, but then also meeting the goals academically, I think was really important. So I think for me, that's, really how, the programs really kind of benefited me or benefited the students, is that sense of belonging, but also for me, that's a sense of fulfillment in my career. And then also to kind of speak to the data is, I think that's why we're retaining students, because we have that personal relationship.
As a specific example of retention, I have a student that had to drop out for a semester because of financial and some logistical things with residency. And before she made the decision to leave for a semester, we talked through and looked up and figured out a path to come back. And I wonder if we hadn't made that plan, and if I hadn't reached out to her during that semester she was gone, I don't know that she would have come back. Just because she had a full-time job, was making decent money, maybe not, but she's back and doing great, and meeting with her again. And, I wasn't her official mentor for a semester, but I was still reaching out because I knew where she worked. And I went by and saw her and asked her, have you started thinking about registering for classes? What are you planning on registering for? How can I help? And that's like one specific instance, but it's a pathway. And I've actually had another student leave, and I'm reaching out to her as well, because she's also planning on coming back. And I'm hoping it's going to happen because we made a plan, but it wouldn't happen without a plan, I don't think. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. And I think that those pieces are so important. The stories, right? And very often when we're collecting data, when we're trying to measure efficiency, efficacy, folks focus heavily on the quantitative, but there is so much power in the story and the qualitative experience. And I know that was a rich part of the work that you all did, and really sets up for future research that you have mentioned. So when if you were to give advice to someone who's creating a mentoring program and they're thinking about data collection and building research into their program, what advice would you give?
Go through the proper channels, but don't be afraid to make mistakes and just get going.
Yeah.
Just start collecting data. You can improve it later.
Yeah. And take time to be thoughtful and do some needs assessment and some lit review, get input from your university partners, read and study what others have done. But at some point you just got to start, because your campus is going to be unique from everyone else's experience. So start with a solid framework, ask a lot of questions, involve your university partners, and get going. But be open-minded. Don't be afraid to realize something's not working, and don't be afraid to change it.
I would also say, use a committee, right? Don't, either a group of faculty, even including staff, administration, whatever it might be. I know we have an AVP in our research group that comes. So it's just nice to have just a conversation to start, bounce ideas off of one another, try to improve upon, certain strategies. And I think it's a process that I don't think one person can do at a university. And I think that's why ours is so successful, is because, I think we have, 15 to 18 faculty that meet once a month that are committed to it. And we kind of work through the kinks of the program and questions. And I just, putting all of our heads together is better than just one idea, I think.
Yeah, it was certainly one of the things I noted early on in your case study is you have a very strong and well-organized committee. That was really impressive. Is there any insights you might offer to someone who, whether they're in higher ed or in private industry, who is trying to pull together a committee? Are there any insights about going about getting that buy-in and building a committee?
I think blanket emails and looking for who responds, because the best people on the committee are the people that already are invested in their hearts that already have a desire to mentor. And so if you just ask, you're going to find people that it's going to fill a need for them professionally. And if it's filling a need, like for me personally, it make like we have the data that says that it fulfills you, but I think it fulfills us partially because we already want to do it. And so you just have to find those people. They exist, they're there.
Yeah.
Find them.
As a matter of fact, when we first started, we don't have an actual formal physical campus in our Southwest region. But we have the person who is over our Southwest region reached out to us and said, we want this, we need this down here. And we were like, yeah. And now they have a vibrant and robust program, and they're thriving because they saw that how useful it could be. And of course, we weren't going to say, well, give us some time, or we're like, no, if you're enthusiastic and you want to be part of this, I think I agree with Hannah. We don't say no. If people want to be here, and we really honor that we're all very busy. So having a bigger committee, I think, is wise, not too big, but I think the 16 to 18 is a good number because we all have teaching loads. We all have other committees we serve on, and we're all friends. So if some of us can't be there, we can text each other things that are at the meeting. There's a lot of good collaboration behind the scenes because the committee works really well together, because there's just enough of us that if you can't make a meeting, someone else can speak for you or keep you in the loop. So I would say be thoughtful. Don't have a committee that's too big, but also be careful about having a committee that's too small. If you only have 8 people on your committee and 3 people have a commitment, it's really hard to get anything done. So that would probably be my advice about that.
And the only thing I would add is to
You're
try
muted,
to,
Jeff.
oh,
There you go.
can you hear me now?
Yep.
Oh, the only thing I would add is to make it part of your strategic plan is to, for us, there was a huge need for retention graduation. So I think for us doing the needs assessment to find out what the students need for mentoring, what are we missing, and then go to the community and say, okay, like, does a mentorship program make sense, right? But then to have the backing of the administration, I think has been huge, not only for funding, but then also giving us time to, count this toward our service. So, I think it would be involving administration as well, because if it's part of the strategic plan, if it's part of their retention, their recruitment phase, I think it's just going to snowball and have some credence to it as far as the purpose goes.
I really want to add on to what Jeff is saying. The institutional support for our committees has meant that this started out as very grassroots, but our admin got involved very quickly and immediately started figuring out how this could become part of our role statements. They really wanted to honor that we are spending a lot of time doing this and we're doing really important work. And they did all the heavy lifting on figuring out what that would look like on our CVs. We didn't have to go to them and ask for that. And so anybody that's thinking about starting a program, I do think institutional support is vital. And I think the institutional support of the amount of time a committee puts in and the admin recognizing that without being pushed, I think that's really important. So if there are any administrators that are listening to this podcast, I would say, really find a way to let those committee people know we spend a lot of time doing this, and yeah, we care about it, but we have families, we have teaching loads, and we've had some really good people have to leave us because it was too much on their plate. And that recognition from the admin for some of us has made all the difference in the world.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. And I know we've heard from others, right, that institutional support and that dedicated time really does help strengthen the program. And when you've got a great program, you see the incredible outcomes that you all have seen across your different campuses. So I'm imagining that there are some folks listening who are maybe in the early stages of implementing or planning and implementing a mentoring program. And they're hearing all the phenomenal things that you've done. They're reading your case study and they're impressed and moved. And maybe in their earliest stages as you start, don't have all the resources. So what do you think is a must-have for someone who's building and planning out a mentoring program?
Training. It's cheap to do and it connects people, gets people talking to each other. But we've put out the training materials are already created. They can take them from us and use them. And so, but training people about what the definitions are and what the framework is and informing them of what the procedures are and all of that, you absolutely have to. It's boring, but you've got to have it.
I think that if you're in the infancy and you're in your first year of meetings with your committee and you're developing your program, I think probably one thing that was vital to us is a thorough SWOT analysis. What are your strengths and weaknesses of your campus? What are the opportunities? What are the threats? And then an honest assessment of that and getting that input from a variety of locations, from student surveys, from faculty surveys. It's really important to know what the needs of your own campus are. And then, like Hannah said, then going to the frameworks and saying what framework works best for us. And then you can start looking at what other people have done and you can start building out from there. And also IRB support. You got to have IRB support. And sometimes that feels daunting, but they're there to help you and support you. So I would say that that's probably something else that very early in the game, you would want to start looking at what that would look like and get somebody on your committee that knows about IRB.
And I'll just add too, I think for me is the faculty buy-in. So I think as you're kind of starting a program and looking maybe at a needs assessment of your students, maybe a focus group of your faculty to say, what are some of the, greatest mentoring that you've done just like in passing, right? And if you could formalize that, how do you think that would elevate some of the success that you're having? If you're having, things to talk about, we have scripts that faculty can use for like a first meeting. We have a complete guidebook that kind of answers questions from like, what if my student needs mental health, or if they're suicidal? Faculty are not trained in that. So what's the proper way to refer someone? So I think having buy-in from the faculty to say like, yes, we're going to support this program because obviously we need the mentors, but also then like get the commitment, right? I think at our training every year, we get a lot of commitment from our newer faculty. And then the older faculty, I think, see that and kind of it rubs off on them. It kind of energizes them again to say, okay, like let's engage in this formal mentorship program. So I think the buy-in is really important because I think if you don't have the faculty buy-in along with the administration, I think it's going to be pretty hard to start a mentorship program, at least with just faculty.
Yeah. Yeah. So what would be something that is a nice to have, maybe not a must have, but a nice to have if you can have it?
I think for me, we have campus chairs. So what a campus chair does is they pretty much like have a subcommittee at their campus. They kind of meet and just kind of talk about issues specific to that one location. So I think having chair support is really nice. So if I have questions, I can reach out to other chairs on other campuses to say like, how are you handling this situation? So I think having the ability to not only meet in our monthly meetings, but also send emails and be able to meet one-on-one. I know Kim's helped me out a ton with questions, so being able to kind of pick up the phone or send an email. So I think having the support in the statewide campus is really nice, just because, this is now my third year, but my first year I was making a ton of mistakes, asking a lot of questions. So to be able to bounce ideas off one another has been really nice.
I
think for me, it's really, I'm sorry, Kim.
Ahead. No, go ahead, Hannah.
I think money for recruitment tools, funding for like nice posters, tablecloths for events, pencils and pens to hand out, t-shirts, like that's really nice to have. Not necessary, but really helpful.
Swag. Yeah.
Swag.
We have a formal troubleshooting process. So in our meetings, David Law, our chair, who's over the whole program, he does a really good job of the agenda always has, very specific what's going on and let's talk about problems and troubleshooting. And so it's kind of a built-in part of our regular meetings. So if you're having a problem, it doesn't feel awkward to say, I have a problem. Like he's got this expectation and he will cue us before the meetings and remind us. And he will even say, I need you specifically. He'll assign people to say, I need you to specifically talk about what's going well and what's not going well. So at every meeting, we always hear from someone, and it just sort of destigmatizes a problem that you might be having, because you start to realize everybody's having problems, and it really crowdsources that information. And it's such a regular and organic thing. So that's nice. Could we live without it? Probably, but it's a really great thing to have.
Yeah, and thanks for that tee up, Kim, because
You're
what could you live without?
I can live without mentees reaching out and saying they haven't heard from their mentor, or mentors reaching out and saying that their mentees, they're not hearing from their mentees. I could live without the communication gaps.
Okay.
Those are heartbreaking and hard, because you know that person wants to be involved. They signed up for the program. The mentor signed up, the mentee signed up. They're not ghosting intentionally. And sometimes there's limited bandwidth to help piece that together. And I could live without that. That's my least favorite part of the whole experience.
I don't like doing the surveys. I understand that we have to have them, but I don't like them.
And they take like 2 minutes.
I know, and they sit in my email and I avoid them for like 2 days and dread it. And they just don't take that long, and I need to just suck it up, but I don't like doing them.
I love the surveys because I'm like, ooh, have I gotten, and I have a list here on my door, and I'm like, ooh, did I get everybody? Okay, I forgot so-and-so. Okay, can't take the survey yet. I got to email this kid and hear back from him. Now I can take the survey and get my good grade. They're very motivating, but yeah, I could live without that too, Hannah.
And I think for me, I put emails from Jim in my notes, just because I think Jim, he's so great when he has to send you an email and say like, oh, how's everything going in Price? By the way, this mentor has not heard from their mentee. Can you check in on that? Because he's like the hub of all where the research goes and the surveys. But I think in that too is maybe the dissatisfied faculty.
Yeah.
I think sometimes maybe if they don't hear back from someone, they might feel a little bit like jaded, or it might be bothersome to them.
Yeah.
Some have quit the program just because of that. So I always try to tell them like it's just one instance. Like we'll get someone next semester, next year. Trying to coach them up to say like it's pretty normal for sometimes students not to respond, but there might be another reason. So we tried texting or calling them, and not just email. Like a lot of my students don't really read email. I actually have a high success rate through text. So I say, hey, other ways to kind of get in contact with the student, I think might be a good idea.
Yeah, for sure. And that's an interesting point, Jeff, that you bring up. I have done a lot of coaching and training in the intergenerational space. And some of us, I certainly know from my generation, have an over reliance on email, and other generations, are more handy. But it is identifying it throughout these processes and through those formative evaluations, what's working, what's not working. We know that some mentoring relationships won't work, but it really sounds like you all have done some tremendous work in creating a program that you have been able to replicate on other campuses and really have some outcomes that improve student experience and retention. And I think as people read through your case study, as well as the rest of the handbook, they're going to find some really great insights that are going to help them in their experience. So thank you all so much for the incredible work that you have done on your campuses, for your contribution to this book and the research and all the people it will touch. It's very much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
And thank you all for listening and watching us today. We will look forward to seeing you in our next episode.